right? Was it used? I think it was you that used the word stagnant, that we're looking at how to do things differently. And at a time when we need to think and have courage to really evaluate how we've been doing things and looking forward to the future.
One of the things that energizes me about all of this is that we have an opportunity to model for congregations what it's like to be in partnership with each other, where there are several congregations in our region that are now reaching out to each other to share staff, to share resources. And it's new territory and it's a little tricky, and sometimes feelings get hurt, and sometimes folks show up and they've had a really long day as a part of those conversations. And so when we can have those conversations and something productive evolves, and then we figure out also, I don't know about you all, but I'm learning to care more about the people who are on this call. It's been a good experience to do that, and it models for me what's possible even within relationships among congregations. They're sort of like icebreakers.
When I think about how I feel about what's been going on, the thing that comes to my mind most is hopeful.
For what, Ken?
You would ask. Hopeful for the possibilities of the future. Hopeful for strengthening the ties across the relational ties across regional boundaries. So I guess hopeful for breaking down long-held divisions of we can't work with them because they're not a part of us.
Your comments making me think, Ken, about you all are having this experience with several meetings over many months and sharing experience and getting to the place where you are caring, maybe in a different way than you showed up originally. But it makes me think about how you would have your local congregations or folks also be able to care like you are. And what will that look like? How will you get there so that they also are hopeful and also energized by the possibilities? Hi, Terry.
I've just kind of reiterating a lot of what's been said. You know, I've missed 2 of these meetings now in a row, and I really was disappointed that I missed them, because I look forward to the interaction with you all and exploring what our possibilities are. There's a lot of hope in that, and touching on what Joyce just said, you know, my congregation doesn't get to see this yet. They're supportive of me being a part of this group, but I would like them to be able to to feel what I'm feeling as I'm working with you guys.
So putting it in the context of the season of Easter, COVID-19 has me personally feeling entombed. My congregation will be meeting back for the first time on May 2nd, but we haven't been meeting since May 15th. So it's hard to feel energized because for so long we have been entombed and under such pressure and stress and anxiety to be church while we can't meet in person. And that's a bit like, forgive me, Christ, of carrying the cross. So, but I mean, it's the season of Easter, and so there's resurrection and there's newness. So I have to echo the answer of newness, because it is something new that we can embrace. And for me, that's what's energizing in the midst of a season that still doesn't really feel like Easter. I haven't met with my folks for 2 Easters. You know, we're waiting to rise up. And it's going to look much different from now on, which is anxious. It has me anxious in itself.
I would say for me, I'm grateful for the Northern Lights example and the example for the 3 regions that are looking at, you know, partnership and everything, just to know someone's kind of done something like this before, where we're not just, you know, totally out there, like other people are looking at this kind of thing and they can give advice, and we can look to, you know, their example to, you know, get ideas, you know, maybe see what's not a good idea. I know they're all fairly new, so we don't really have a lot of those stories yet, but it's just nice to have other examples out there already. I've always find that helpful on new things, so. All right, did anybody have anything else they wanted to add for the first part of the conversation there?
The only thing that I would add is it seems like there's something happening kind of in the ether that I can't name. There's not a word that comes to mind, but something's working. The spirit is working in ways that, at least for me, I see all of what you all have mentioned, so I don't want to repeat that, but there's something else. It's that unknown quality that excites me.
All right, did everybody have a chance to look at the varieties and partnership attachment? I know we looked at it. I don't remember if it was last meeting or the one before, but we've talked about it before. But hopefully everybody got a chance to look at that. And what stands out to you in that? Yeah, there we go. Sorry, I forgot to mention that we're going on to that. What stands out to you in the different types of partnerships and the different terms that are used for those different types?
Just a real quick note that I'm going to be taking notes as you talk, so I'm going to be toggling back and forth between this document and my note-taking document.
The thing that struck me as I read through all those examples, is how unsatisfying many of them were until I got down to merger. With each one of them, I could see pros and cons, but mostly cons. I mean, the cons kind of outweighed the pros. They just felt unsatisfying to me as something worthy of our efforts. I guess the best way I can say it is each one of them, until I got down to merger, really kind of felt like there was something else that we could be doing besides whether it was movements or coalitions or collaborations. There was just something missing in there. I don't know if that was intentional by the producer of the document, but I wasn't really happy with any of them until merger. And I don't think I'd have said that several months ago.
Kelly, do you have a sense about what the shift is for you?
I think it's something to do with, we're going to put a lot of effort into this. And it seems like we need to get as much out of it as we can. And if we stop short of the big something new, I will feel like we've left something on the table, or we've I don't want to say wasted our effort, but we've missed out on something that could be.
I'm kind of like Kelly. I mean, nothing really, nothing seems appealing. I mean, I like networking, and I think that's what we're doing right now. And if we could do that on a region-wide, tri-region-wide basis, that might be interesting. There can be cons, like Kelly said, though, within that, and it might, I don't know that that's what we want, but yeah, it seems like there should be something a little more exciting. It's too businesslike, or it's just too stale. It's not exciting enough.
I am not ruling out something like a merger, and that may be in our future, but I would like to honor the people that have sent me into this conversation, who think that we're talking about partnering, who haven't made the leap and haven't been in these conversations to have the same kind of energy that we have for this relationship. And so I'm a little nervous that as a group, we might plow ahead beyond the folks that we have in our regions, and without keeping them abreast and keeping them um, involved in the process. And maybe that's just the Kansas region, but my guess is that when you all spent the money for us to get Joyce, that you had a conversation with your regional boards and that you had a conversation about what this was going to be about. And I know that what we said it was going to be about was figuring out ways to partner with the other two regions. So maybe that, if you all can talk me off that tree pretty easy, because I'm with Kelly, this is exciting. But I also want to make sure we don't get ahead of our group. Does that make sense?
I think so.
I agree that it makes sense, Lori.
I do think the question is, though, what kind of partnership are we looking at? And that's what each one of those descriptions of a kind of partnership. And I think the question is, what kind of partnership excites us to move forward?
I have two questions that come up in looking at this. So I'm not responding to any one of those in particular, but two things that keep nagging at me. One is, what is God asking of us? And secondly, are we committed to transformation or transforming? And I will tell you that my bias has always been, not always been, actually my bias has generally been in the past to transforming. But as I move into this work and other work around the life of the church, I'm much more interested in becoming transformative. And some of that is language that I'm borrowing from Transformative Community Conferencing with Dr. David Anderson Hooker. But the point's been made to me that I will never arrive. In fact, once I think I've arrived, I may check out. I need to be in process and open to where the Spirit is leading today. And that's caused me to be less concerned about arriving somewhere as of being somewhere with God, with the people we're serving, with the leaders in our respective callings. And an openness to what that will look like across regional barriers.
I find it interesting that you use the word barriers, which, you know, kind of smacks of we're getting in our own way. You know, there's something prohibiting us from being what we can be because we've got to deal with barriers. And wouldn't it be nice if we had no barriers, or at least operated as if we didn't? I just think it's an interesting word.
If I can, Kelly, I'd love to respond because I think you raise a great point. I think a lot of us have been raised in a culture that says fences make good neighbors. And there's some presumptions behind that. And if we're going to live in a land with no fences, my hunch is I am going to have to show up differently as your neighbor than I might have if I had my privacy fence around me. Personally, I'm all for living a fence-free church life, but I also know that I have not always been there and that it takes a lot of work to stay in this.
Well, fences make things easy, not necessarily better, but easy.
I sort of like the image of the archaeologist who explores, because I think that's what we are doing. And I really don't know that we can go beyond a process of exploration, but you know what we are what we are doing as a group is exploring in conversation what a partnership or a kind of partnership might look like, and then we want to bring our congregations into dialogue with us. It's all about exploration and nothing else. We can't arrive at the end point. I think that gets to Bill's also, I'm where you like, you've always thought of yourself as transforming or in the process of transformation, not arriving at an end point. We certainly can't do that, but exploration is fun. And I think we just need to have fun with this and bring our congregations into dialogue to have fun. And the more that we explore, then we can begin to make some decisions about where we want to go. But I don't think we should deny ourselves the joy of exploration.
Carol, the other day I was reflecting upon that little helicopter up there on Mars after it made its first strange little flight. And I was thinking back when I was just a kid sitting in the gymnasium of my elementary school watching Alan Shepard, get launched for that brief little flight that he made. And about then later, years later, going to the Cosmosphere in Hutchinson and looking at one of those Mercury capsules and thinking, oh my God, who in the world was either foolish enough or had enough courage to get into that tin can looking thing up on top of a big old rocket and let them, shoot me off into space. But, thinking that if hour long or whatever it wasn't a very long flight, however long that flight was, that wasn't the point of the program. And if we had all been just thinking, well, let's just see if we can shoot ourselves up in space for a little bit and come back home in one piece, we'd not be looking at that helicopter flying around on Mars. So it's a process, but it's a process with an intent to go somewhere. And we don't know where is, and probably shouldn't know where it is, because we'll always be looking forward.
Yeah, we'll be long gone before the fruits of the exploration or partnership, or look how long it's taken from Alan Shepard or the first astronauts to where we are today. And it's like you plant a vision, but
all of that suggests to me something that I hear our general minister and president remind us continuously in any of the meetings I've had the opportunity to be with Terry. And that is the need for spiritual disciplines and spiritual practices. I think if we're in a journey of being transformative or being transforming, it's a willingness to embrace the not knowing what's ahead. Having some intention, like I hear you all talking about, but underneath that is it's really hard. As I've experienced working with people in the church and other places, it's the not knowing that is sometimes the hardest. It's some of what I think I heard, Gloria, you were saying about not getting too far ahead of our local church folks. Like there's gaps, and not knowing can create anxieties, or we can use those as opportunities to ask about what you asked, Bill, at the beginning of this. What was the language you used? But what is God asking of us? And sometimes we don't know the answer to that, and living with that uncertainty.
I would agree with you. And I would also think that maybe in this process, we need to be building in some places where we give our people notices of how we're progressing, if that makes sense. So we're not leaving them completely in the dust behind us. And then all of a sudden we're going to say, hey, we've been having all this fun and we want to merge. And they're still thinking that we're fine where we are. Maybe we need to be figuring out a system of updating our regions as to what we're doing. Maybe the other two regions are doing that, where you're making reports to your regional newsletter or updating your own congregations. And if you are, I would really like to hear about that, because I think that may be something we are not doing right now in Kansas.
Lori, I'm not sure I'm hearing you not agreeing about the movement, the energy that I'm feeling. I think you're, if I'm hearing you right, you're just saying, again, how do we keep in contact with our local folks and help them understand what we're doing, what we're learning, what we're seeing?
Joyce, that's exactly right. It's not that I disagree with what we're doing, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm energized by it as well. My concern is leaving folks behind, and then we come and we're all energized and here's our big plan, and they go, wait, you left me back here at what has happened? I don't, and they're not up with us. So you're right, Joyce.
Yeah, I'd kind of be surprised if you all really created a plan that bold without their input at some level.
I think with us meeting virtually this way, as opposed to meeting in person, it gives us somewhat of a sense of a surrealness to it. We're wired to meet in person for meetings. And so sometimes I think a little bit of the disconnect that, or the barriers that we've said that we feel at times, I think some of it is purely because we have to meet in a Zoom format. And like you said, I love the energy that I'm feeling. I love the things that we're exploring. And I've given it some thought, because I'm like, what is it that feels different? And I think there's a part of it that is strictly because we're meeting by Zoom. But this is the new way that we are doing things now with the pandemic.
I just made a quick note. I want to just name that I added a piece that we had put together a brief piece for Northern Lights, just to give them an idea of what we have been up to. Just want to note that there is the beginning of something that we might want to work from at some point in the future, of how do we do a common communication piece.
Minimally having something like that as a lead into your work with your local congregation seems very reasonable. So they'd have some context to why are you coming to us asking these kinds of questions.
Well, and that really makes a lot of sense to do some communication before we spring questions on them.
Mm-hmm. We've just been meeting in person for 2 weeks, and this last Sunday I mentioned it to 2 of our ministry team about our partnership and the work we've been doing. Just briefly mentioned it to them, and they were both interested in hearing more. And I said that we would be approaching the congregations down the road, and so they were interested in our process for doing that. And I said we had not yet decided that, but they seemed interested and wanted to hear more when we were ready to share. I will say that we have not really been making reports to the regional board here in Kansas City. We met in our regularly scheduled quarterly meeting within the last 2 weeks, and we did not discuss our steering committee. Maybe we should have. No one asked. Another comment that has been in my mind as we go to congregations, and I would just like people to kind of think about where your congregations are at. And this is something that came up when I was talking to one of our ministry team, is how much do the local congregations really know about the region? Are they going to have opinions? Are we going to need to do some education about the regions before we ask them questions so that they can make, helpful suggestions and comments that we are hoping they will make? So that's something that's been on my mind, especially the last few weeks, is the level of knowledge and awareness that, like, I can only speak for my congregation. And do they really, not that they don't care, but do they really feel it's important for them to understand the structures? Those are things that have been really on my mind a lot since our last meeting.
I appreciate Peggy's comment, because sometimes it feels like where regional ministry is concerned, we feel like the back office of an insurance company. You may know your insurance agent, you may like your coverage if you have to use it, but you very seldom will visit the back office, and you don't know what role you might play to add value to developing future products that might be better than what the company currently offers. Unfortunately, there's a lot of corporate understanding of what constitutes a region.
If I were to talk to most members in our congregation, if they've not been part of the process to call a new minister, they may have, besides the offerings that we have throughout the year, that's about the level of their understanding about the regional church.
Well, and I think that, and I know we're talking about it a little bit later with the questions for local congregations, but if they don't know that much, are we going to get that much information back that's useful for us in this process? So I don't know where to go with that, but if we're going to, be sending these out and we're expecting certain, responses to be helpful, if they don't really know, are we going to get helpful responses?
Thank you, Megan, for saying that. I think to just tag on to that, meaningful responses that will help us in this process. I appreciate your comments.
I just want to affirm what you're saying, Peggy and Megan, just from the standpoint of the whole church, the wider church. I mean, we've just come out of a general board meeting where we've invited the members of the general board, about 120 some people, to think about some questions and ideas about how we might govern ourselves differently in terms of what decisions are made by the general board versus decisions that are made by the General Assembly. How is the general board constructed? A different configuration of working committees that allow us to do more deliberative work. And it strikes me that some of the people who are even on the general board, if they're new, don't necessarily know about that, how the general church works, right? Or what the relationship of the regions is to the general board. And so it's one thing that did come back, though, was great appreciation for the fact that they were being involved at this stage of the process, and that it was not a matter of, oh, here you are, here's something we need you to vote on. And that's one thing in our church that we understand is an issue. Even when we think about General Assembly, we have a very narrow window under our current process. If we have an idea, or say a resolution or something, comes through to a general board in the spring of the year, February or April, ready to be put on the floor in July, and we've had no opportunity to talk about those things or discuss them or whatever. So one of the things that the governance committee of the general board is grappling with is we want other people across the church to weigh in on some of the questions that that we just took to the general board. That's number one, going to be a very new thing for us. And you're just making me just really think hard, like, wow, what kind of understanding will we have about some of these questions or issues if people aren't as familiar in general about the workings of our general board and general assembly and those kinds of things. And that kind of hits at why we're doing this work, really, because we know we have a sort of a connection problem, that because of the way we govern ourselves, and I won't use the word autonomous, I'll use the word self-governing, that congregations aren't always as connected or don't understand why they need to be connected. And we're getting ready to roll out a curriculum around covenant and hopefully getting everybody on the same page about what that means, first of all, and what it means in the life of our church at each expression of our church. So there's a lot that many of us don't understand about who we are as disciples and how we do things. And we also have to acknowledge that there are places in our church where we have a lot of new disciples who've chosen to be disciples, who they're not second and third generation. They became disciples as young adults, or maybe they became disciples as middle-aged adults, but they've chosen our movement. They weren't born into it. And so they're excited about something, right, that they've seen within us, that some of us may take for granted, or I guess I've been a disciple since I was 20. I won't tell you how many years ago that was, but it's a few decades. But that kind of issue of what do we know about ourselves and how do we affirm who we are as we're asking these questions, that's going to be part of the challenge. Is not enough of us to really understand exactly why we do what we do and who we are. So I just want to say that just like these conversations are happening in lots of other places around the church, that challenge, I think, will continue to be present for us. And you're naming that just really crystallized that for me.
Just throwing this out there, is there something we can do to help our local churches understand more about what we do? I mean, I don't know what that would be, but is there something education wise that we can help help Nebraska understand the region, help Kansas City understand it, stuff like that? And especially like the congregation I'm in has a lot of new people, so I mean they're not going to have that. So I don't know what that would be, but is there a way to educate to help fill people in on what we're doing and what the region does and what this I mean, even the partnership and all of that too, even if they're new, they should probably know about it. So I don't know what that would be, but yeah.
Megan, can I respond to that? Shameless plug for the covenant education materials that will be coming out soon. One of the things I've learned recently, and this was with the help of Dr. David Anderson Hooker, was that sometimes if we get people starting talking about something that they can engage with without preconceived notions or without feeling like there's an agenda that they have to fulfill, it leads then to congregations about things that do matter on a more personal level to people. And in this particular case, by having conversations, if we help to organize it, that would be something that we could do as 3 regions. We could be very intentional about getting those conversations started with the materials that have already been provided. And those materials are not meant to say, this is what covenant is. It's not another confession. It's meant to catalyze conversation, and there's going to be a feedback loop so that as people engage in these conversations, we're going to be asking them to report back. What happened when you talked about what covenant means between you and God, between God and the church, and between us within the Christian Church Disciples of Christ? Now that we've talked about that, what did you take from that? And what implications might that have about how we organize ourselves? And so it opens up the field. And if we're smart about it, and of course, our general minister and president have been very good about keeping us on task about remembering why we wanted to do this in the first place. We did not want to come from a position of we know what needs to happen. We came from a position of God knows what needs to happen, and we'd like to hear what God has to say about that. And we know that God speaks through prayer and scripture and you. And taking that together and then letting that shape whatever form comes after that. And I'm sorry, I'm probably doing more talking than I should, but that's one way that we might be able to work together.
Well, I'd like the idea of talking more about covenant and what we are as a group, because I think so often congregations have a tendency to think of themselves autonomously, and it's just we are Murray Christian Church. And when I start talking each week during my prayer of the people, and I pray for the congregation of that week, and each time I hope in doing that I'm getting them to think beyond Murray Christian, and it includes, First Christian in Omaha and their pastor. And it's an ongoing, because anytime I talk about doing anything like with this group, they're like, that's nice of you to be interested in that, Pastor Mike. You go do that. But they don't think about what impact the larger picture has for them.
I also think there's something about protecting some people's innocence when they are still babes drinking milk. Some of our people in our local congregations have fragile relationships with the church and with God and with their neighbors because they're going to church. And so I guess my biggest concern may not be a lot of the local congregations as much as it is people who are already, I'm going to say this wrong, but mature in their path and involved in the greater church. And they're already in the region, and they've already been putting blood, sweat, and tears into making the region, and all the local churches benefit from that. And I don't want to leave them behind. I don't want to overkill local churches that may not, some of the members of local churches who may not be ready to be dealing with any kind of the politics of church or dynamics of relationships or any of that. They just want to know that God is there in that place and serving communion to them. So, but I do think that we have people who are well-versed in the business of church. And I think that they have the right to get excited and be a part of that journey with us. And so I really appreciate this conversation because it explains to me that I've got work to do. If I'm going to be the moderator of the region, I need to be proactive and keeping my region, those people who are already at that level on board with what's going on so that they can be the shepherds for the flocks.
I don't know if, I think this is in line with what you just said, Lori, but I'm not sure. I was talking with the 4 disciple churches in Omaha are talking about how they can partner. How can they have a strong disciples presence in Omaha? And one of the comments that I heard pretty well stated was that coming out of COVID, right now, a lot of people are really looking for that relationship link, that connection with people that they haven't been with for a year. And they're looking for really some simple ways of being faithful wanting that relationship with each other, the relationship with God and with Christ. And so it was in the context of the claim was that all four churches are very interested in the worship service, and they're interested in serving the community. And how do they focus on those things that will strengthen and not divide? And so I'm not sure, like I said, I don't know if that's in tandem with what you're saying or if it was just a spark. What you said may have just been a spark to those earlier conversations this week.
I think that was really good, Chris.
The information about the covenant, the education packet that's coming out, does that address the region and like different churches in the regions?
Not directly. Those conversations will likely happen because of the people who will be having those conversations. Some people will already have a connection to the wider church and its regional and general expressions, global ministries, all of that, and some will not. The idea is to explore, what does it mean to be in covenant? And then what are the implications of covenant for how we do what we do? And then that will lead naturally, I think, to questions about, and who else should be a part of this conversation? So we've now met as a congregation. We've got a new sense of fresh excitement about what God may be calling us to do. Are there partners that we might be working with? Or is there some form of support that we need now that we have a better sense of what we need to do? We work with congregations, for instance, who discover that their neighborhood has changed dramatically over the last 20 years, and there are unmet needs in that community. And because somebody has paid attention to the collection of spiritual gifts and passions and experiences, are saying, you know, it may be that we've been constructed by God for this moment to help this part of the community meet an unmet need. I wonder what that would be like. And if we would need to partner with, National Benevolent Association does some work with social services for youth and for senior citizens. If that fits in, you see where this is going. It doesn't start out with a script, but it lends itself to creating a context in which those holy ideas that people have already and are just now beginning to share with each other. And of course, in some respects, that'll be somewhat curated, I would think, by people in leadership in those congregations, wherever they have these conversations. There'll be some folks who have connection with the wider church and may begin to see, we could connect here. This might be worth looking at.
It makes me think of, classically, people think of communications as a one-way conversation, like you're preaching or whatever, and you're telling the congregation information. But what we're seeking is communications as a sharing. Like it doesn't end once someone shares one direction. You're listening to the other person and they're sharing, and you're both learning, and the process starts all over again, sort of thing. And I like that. We looked at all those other kinds of partnership earlier in the document, and covenant has that, theological edge to it that assumes a certain way of thinking, but also koinonia, we translate it however you want, fellowship, partnership. But those are strong words that are shown to us throughout the New Testament, the Old Testament, and what they would encourage. So I'm just starting to think about, what does it mean then to think about the regions in partnership in those terms? It kind of sweeps you up into another way of thinking. I just was thinking, I think Kelly said earlier he was unsatisfied with all those other terms for partnerships. So I'm like, well, what if we explored these other aspects that are already right there in our tradition, right before us? I mean, I like, and Terry, I think, said before a lot, becoming beloved community.
I so agree. I'm doing a wedding this weekend, and it's like I'll be talking about covenant, not a movement or a network or collaboration or coalition, but a covenant. And that's theological. That's our language for what it means to be in relationship or partnership. So yes, covenant needs to be the word under partnership type. And I think that's how we approach our local congregations when we begin to educate them about what the work it is that we're doing, but rooted in covenant. We're not three different regions. We are disciples of Christ in covenant with each other in three geographical areas, but we're not separate.
Yeah. It just makes me think like in the book of Acts, where the words are always the fellowship or, the koinonia they had, or in Philippians or in First John, I'm writing to you so that you'll have fellowship with the Father and the Son and with one another. And and I can't help but get, because they're like, and they shared all things together. That's what you're talking about, not having fences, Bill.
And when we think about evangelism, most congregations are. Many are thinking about, do we have enough to sustain the life of the church going forward, which can be either a self-centered or an outreaching attitude. People who are coming to be a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ are not coming because they think they need something. Oftentimes it's because they have something to offer, and we're the place that will welcome that. We'll invite them to share their gifts, and where some of them have not had that opportunity before. But bottom line is, no one gets persuaded to be a Christian or to follow Jesus. We were all inspired somehow. And we all have stories. We all have stories about why we're here and what we do and why we do what we do and why we sacrifice what we sacrifice.
Your language earlier, it really struck me, the transformation versus transformative. And I've been thinking about lately, I've been talking about what's next, just having that mindset of, we haven't arrived. I talk about it like, after Easter, people disappear as if they've arrived fully, like, they're set, they're good to go. But I'm like, but the rest of the New Testament, it's all about what's next, trying to figure out what's next. And I feel like that's what we're doing, but I like thinking about that. What is next for us?
Yeah, in other conversations, I've been really hesitant about just the word transformation, in large part because we turned it into this process, this thing that the church did, right? If you wanted to do transformation, you could have somebody from Hope Partnership come or somebody from DHM come, and we've sort of depleted that word of its possible hopefulness, I think. And so I also like this concept that we shouldn't really be just doing transformation as though there's an endpoint. But if we can learn to develop this human capacity to always be transformative, that wherever we are is never an endpoint, that there's always something next, that there's always something that we, a way in which we should be looking at ourselves with a great deal of hopefully self-awareness and reflectiveness to say, okay, so now what is God saying to us? I mean, that's a question that has been asked throughout the ages. Our design is called the design because at the time there were conversations going on with the World Council of Churches, and the question was being raised by people like Paul Tillich, what is God's design for the church? And so disciples were pretty enamored with that. with that idea to say, what is God calling us to do and be? So these conversations that we're having now are not new, and we're not going to stop having them. Generations after us will hopefully still be here to keep asking that question, what's now, what's next? And so being transformative, I think, is a really powerful and necessary distinction from doing transformation, because we do transformation. I used to be an IT consultant, and we're always doing, multiple year strategic plans. Well, people write the plan, it's in a binder on someone's shelf, and you think you've done strategic planning. Well, you're never really done with it. You should always be rethinking and reassessing, if it makes sense. So I acknowledge my own predisposition against even the word transformation, because of it's sort of dead within our church. People don't think about it hopefully, but transformative, being transformative, I think, has great potential as we think about who we can be. And I've been involved with Bill and the work of Dr. David Anderson Hooker too, and so that has taken on new purchase for me as a not just a concept, but a capacity that we need to build within ourselves and within the church.
I'm really
Belvin.
hoping you all will include this kind of language in how you talk to your local congregations. I think this distinction seems to have some energy in this conversation as well, for people to get that regardless of what's happening in this meeting that these meetings you all keep having, that this idea of being transformative and not really knowing the answers, and that still being really energizing, is cool and inviting. Actually, it feels very inviting. Come and see.
Dr. Belden Lane once told a story about a pilgrim who visited Rome in the High Middle Ages. And as the pilgrim was being taken on a tour, the tour guide was pointing out all of the opulence of the Vatican, and said somewhat sheepishly, I guess Peter can no longer say, silver nor gold have I. And the pilgrim turned to the tour guide, said, yes, and I'll bet it's been a while since Peter was able to say, rise up and walk, to the lame man. Oh, to be a part of a church.
Joyce, come and see was one of the themes of a past General Assembly. I can't remember if it was Nashville or Portland.
Denver. It was
Denver. Okay.
97. My husband was the music director for that assembly. That's why I recall it well. But yeah, we had a theme song that was written for that and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Justin, you're way too young for all that.
So
and Megan, you too. Yeah.
I just to offer a little counterbalance to that, it's to come and see sounds a little bit spectatorish. Sorry, I don't want to be critical, but I don't want to leave that alone either.
I have an absolutely non-associated question with any of our discussion. I just want to know, Chris, do you really take notes that fast? Or do you have a machine that is listening and taking them for you?
Since it's not really a question, I'll just leave that for the not knowing and the mystery. No, I really type that fast.
Will that question be on the notes?
We started this conversation by looking at the document about different types of partnerships or different ways of being together. And I'm really appreciating the fact that not only are you not landing on one, even though merger had a little more energy than anything else, but you're okay perhaps leaving it and going on to a different conversation that introduces other terms that make more sense to you or have more energy to you. So I don't know, Megan, if you were itching to try, okay, are we done with this or not? But I just wanted to acknowledge that you know what it's not. You may not know what it is, but you kind of have a sense of what it's not.
Well, and I think it's good to, have these conversations, because if, we just assume that everybody that we're going to be talking with, knows what's going on, and it's not going to go anywhere because they don't all know. So we do need to have these types of conversations, and, even if we don't make it through all of our agenda or whatever, it's good to keep going with this. I think so. We did have the interest in speaking with Illinois and Wisconsin and Michigan, and then also the local church vitality. I just want to see if people want to keep going with what we're talking about now, or if we want to move to one of those two. Where do people want to be? I don't want to cut off anything that's going good so far. So.
I just wanted to mention something. I think it went earlier. There's kind of the question of how do you get people to care about the region? Like, how do you get people to care beyond the local church? And I can't help but think about when we talked about vitality before, Bill was talking about making disciples or being witnesses, you should say, you'll be my witnesses to the ends of the earth sort of thing. It seems like if you care about being witnesses, then you care about what the rest of the church is doing, because you have, this idea of orientation, what you're supposed to be about. I don't know, just thinking out loud. How do you get people to care? There has to be something about their self-understanding as a Christian has to have some sort of care for that built in, it seems.
And covenant's a good way to approach that, I think. People bound in covenant care about the relationship, and love is, for some covenant relationships, love is the underlying factor. Love above all else. And I think that we talk about our work in the context of covenant, and as a part of that covenant is our love for each other as disciples of Christ, both denominational and as followers of Jesus Christ.
Megan, you asked about whether or not we wanted to go ahead and meet with Illinois, Wisconsin group. I think it would be helpful, because then we would have both the extremes of what it means to be in covenant together. And it might be good to hear from them and see how their process worked. And I don't know if anybody else feels that way, and if nobody does, then that's okay. I thought it might be good to be able to weigh we just went full all in, and we're working this out.
Well, and yeah, that's like I said earlier, like having examples of stuff that people are doing, have done, have started. I always find helpful. I don't know about everybody else, but I always find helpful for, helping to make decisions for our group and, different things like that. So I was just curious about interest in that possibility. So.
I agree. I mean, we heard from Northern Lights, and I think hearing from another example of regions working across borders would be great. People from the Northwest are a bit flaky. Oh, sorry, Chris. So getting back into the Midwest, people like us.
I can't help but to notice that the last time when we got together with the Northern Lights people, that Sandy Messick and Bill Jennison seemed to be deeply appreciative that we were interested and we could affirm the good work that they did. That just doesn't happen very often. So in some respects, this is another way to live out covenant, that we not only seek information and witness, but we also witness to them, wow, what you're doing is brave, or if necessary, for providing a piece of insight that it may not feel quite so good, but might be incredibly valuable just from the process of listening and engaging.
I think it would be interesting. What are their motivating factors? We know what the Northern Lights, we know what their situation was. So I think that not everybody's got those same kinds of issues. So I think it'd be a very good idea. I also think that we need to figure out how we're going to talk to our congregations so they're aware of the regional church. And I can't get past that. I think we have to come up with something.
Well, do churches at all have like new member classes or anything like that? That's what I thought of was, maybe if people that are interested in learning about the church, you would introduce, well, like, we got our local churches, we got regional churches, we got this sort of thing.
I think we have those new member classes. Of course, we haven't for the last year, but I don't know if there's discussion or time allowed to discuss the larger church. That's something that, would be a good question.
I say that just because that seems like people are interested in becoming members. It seems they're interested in the church. So that would be a great place to talk about that. But, that's a whole nother thing. How do you get people there? But it seems to be the place where it would be a good place to start. Not transformation, but, just to start kind of trying to get some interest in care. I don't know. I'm always caught up on that, like care. What do you care about? What do you love? How do we get you to think about that?
So my folks are just interested in trying to get back together to reintroduce themselves to each other. We haven't worshiped for 2 Easters and, again, for 13 months. The caring about the regional church and in general, that's not a commentary, but that's reality. They're trying to reestablish their connection with each other. We have time because we're still in pandemic and we just can't, we have time to sort this out. We can't lay it on our congregations aren't ready for something like this right now, I don't think.
Well, it seems like, I care about myself and how we're getting through COVID, but then my concern also extends to people in other churches as well. How are they getting through this? Or I don't know. It's hard. We're so individualistic already as Americans. Like that's just ingrained. So seems like though the church is a place where people learn to care and for others and love others. But yeah, you're right. That's the reality.
Yeah,
We just,
live stream doesn't kill us, because I mean, it's going to kill a lot of connections that we've had in terms of, it is so much nicer to wake up and get a cup of coffee and watch worship online than it is to come and be in person. And I think that again, that's part of, we're going to be a different church from now on, and I have a lot of anxiety about that.
I have to say that I'm feeling a whole new energy level. My church started meeting last 2020 Father's Day, and so we've been back in. But Palm Sunday and Easter Sunday, we had a marked number of our members that had gotten both of their COVID shots, and the time had elapsed so that they were covered. And there's a whole new level of excitement when they're coming into the church, and all of a sudden I'm having to rein them in, and it's like, okay, everybody, it's 9 o'clock, let us begin our worship. And they're like, hold on a second, Pastor, and they want to talk more. It's exciting for them, because I haven't seen that excitement in my congregation for quite a while.
I don't know if you all read, was the link in the notes for the group you were just talking about inviting. But in their partnership proposal, some of their words aren't so different than what you're talking about here.
Well, and if we are, interested in speaking with them, is there a number of people that want to be a part of a group to, get questions ready, like the last time when we spoke with Northern Lights, and, get that all started? Would anybody be interested in helping get that process started?
is there enough information about their process?
I know, there's a lot on, and I found it through Michigan's website for the most part. They've got several from their proposal to how their region, accepted it and everything like that. I don't have a lot of specifics for who was involved with that. I didn't get that far into it, but there was quite a bit of their process through the website that I listed there, and a few links that were also included inside that website.
Ruby mentioned earlier about talking with them and asking what was their motivation, what were their reasons for initiating this process. And I just quickly reviewed the partnership proposal. I think it would be helpful to actually speak with them to get their personal opinions outside of what is listed. This partnership proposal is very interesting. What I thought was really caught my attention is that Michigan is actually gonna remunerate, which I had never heard that word before, $30,000 to Illinois. It won't be paid to the regional or the Illinois-Wisconsin regional minister and president. They will use the funds to compensate time of staff in our region as they help Michigan or other mission opportunities. So that the financial aspect, that was something new that jumped out at me. We hadn't really talked about that. I think it'd be interesting to talk with them, and I'd be willing to help with getting some questions together. I think the questions that we asked Northern Lights were great. We could just, build on those. Don't you guys think?
I think so.
that's a good start. So maybe if everyone will look at that proposal that Megan shared. It was very interesting, very interesting. A comment was made, this is not simply a business arrangement, but our attempt to be one in Christ for the benefit of both regions and to glorify God's name and Jesus's ministry. So committed to the work of anti-racism. So if everyone will take a look at that when you get a chance and let me know what questions you have in addition to the ones that we asked Northern Lights. I'd be willing to, be a contact person for questions that anyone has that they would like to ask. I could come up with that list.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let me know if I can help in any way.
Okay.
I do think, I was going to say, I think the same questions would be would be fine to ask them.
I think we could build on those questions. I thought that I felt very informed but had a better understanding after using the questions that whoever it was in the group that came up with those questions. I appreciate the time it took to do that. Why recreate the wheel when we've got some good questions already?
Makes sense. Yep.
No, there's a lot of good stuff in their proposal. We could just simply ask, like, how did they come to agreement that on certain issues in the proposal, perhaps?
Ruby, what was it you said when you were, did you say what motivated them? I can't remember what verb you use. What?
Well, I debated upon that before I said it. Now I can't think. I think I did say what motivated them, but that probably is not the right word.
Think about it. Let me know if you come up with
Did you say
another.
motivating factors? What were their motivating factors or something like that?
Yeah,
maybe?
I think. Okay.
All right, well, we just have a couple minutes left. I think the discussion with the local church vitality, we want to spend a little time on. Are we okay postponing that just a little bit here so we can get some real discussion in on that? Also thinking about the fact that we need education within the local churches as well before we can maybe even propose these questions if we're looking for. Yes, Ken.
Yeah, I've been pretty quiet this whole meeting. I was thinking about how do we begin communicating what we have been doing. And I'd like to suggest we utilize some of our existing communication venues or processes already. And what I'm thinking of is beginning as soon as we can. I would like each of the three from Kansas to take turns writing a short article for our regional newsletter that goes out every month of just talking about, hey, I'm a part of this process. I'm excited about it because this. And I think it'd have more impact by having you all write the article than either Steve or I in Kansas. But that's one way to begin saying, hey, this is going on, folks. I'm a part of it. And this is why, and this is what I'm hearing happening. And then we start utilizing, putting some of that on our regional web page, on our Facebook page, use some of what's being said to put out on social media, other social media accounts. And then part of the work would also be with Steve and I as regional ministers when we go out to do church visits or connect with various groups, whether it's clergy cluster, what have you, start talking about it as regional ministers to get the ministers to be more aware of what's going on, what's happening. And then I will share with you that I am already booked to do a special workshop, all-day workshop for one of our congregations that used to be one of our big and strongest congregations that has become disconnected somewhat over the past 30 years. And they have an interim minister right now who is concerned about that, and he wants me to come in and talk about or help to build bridges between the region and the congregation again, because they have somewhat been disconnected. And as I have been thinking about this workshop, I think I'm going to start with having them introduce themselves to me as far as those that show up, and me introducing myself to them, even though I've been in the region for 13 years. The congregation is not one that I have typically worked with, but I also want to know, what is their church background? How long have they been a part of Disciples? I want to find out from them, why are they a part of this particular congregation? And then begin building upon that of what does it mean to be who we are as disciples, and why are we different? And so there's going to be some church history, there's going to be some polity stuff built into this. There's going to be we'll see where it goes from there as I work on it. But some of what we've been saying tonight has been triggering thoughts for that workshop of how do I help them understand who we are as disciples, but also as the Christian Church in Kansas, and how that just like, well, that they as individuals are a member of a local congregation, but that also means they're part of a church that we call Christian Church in Kansas. And they are also a part of this church we call the Christian Church Disciples of Christ in the United States and Canada. And I can see that part of this means that we will touch on some of what's going to be happening or what we are doing in the region now with these conversations and with the covenantal initiative with the general church, and with however I can weave all the different things to help them understand that for us, the priesthood of all believers is very important. And that comes with it this sense of connectedness, and the sense of accountability to one another. So that's kind of what's going on in my mind, and I thought I would share that before we signed off.
Ken, I love that.
And here they just thought they were coming to church. It's more than that.
Ken, I love that approach. I appreciate that kind of bing, 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 bing. I'm wondering if all of us might make that kind of a commitment. And then that made me wonder, is it something that we would want to put out on a semi-monthly or monthly basis, and not ask Mike Ness to write for the Nebraska region, but his article be shared across all three regions, and we rotate those in the 1st and the 15th of each month. We put out a communique from Tri-Regional Partnership.
I love that. I think that would really help seam together the conversations we're having. Because if we're writing something for your region and you're writing something for ours, and we're rotating around and we're hearing from all the regions, then all of a sudden there's some ownership of all of them. I think that's outstanding, Chris.
I think it also helps us portray a consistent message. And I think that's important that we do that.
All right. I do just want to say we should probably figure out when we want to meet next month. I do have the reminder Memorial Day is May 31st. So I'm assuming that probably is out. Don't know for sure, but does anybody have an idea for when we should meet for next month, or conflicts with?
You all changed the usual meeting date for the Kansas region because of our clergy retreat. So normally we would have met on May the 25th. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that's before Memorial Day. So we can be pious and meet and then go play.
All right, are we good with May the 25th? Anybody have issues with that?
I will be out of town that day. We're on vacation that whole week. So
Are you saying Monday, the 25th or Tuesday, the 26th?
No, it's Tuesday, the 25th.
Yeah.
Oh my
Isn't it?
goodness.
May?
Yeah.
What
May,
year
May,
is it?
May.
May 25th, that Tuesday.
That's a Tuesday.
So
Thank
we
you.
need to figure out what, Kevin? I mean, I led from Kansas City before. I think Peggy
Yeah.
led as well, and she's gone. So there's one person left, other than Bill.
Justin, I like that you keep track of which region and who. So
Well, it was in the notes. It said that Kansas
It's-
City was up.
Yeah.
I'm not taking credit for that.
I
that
went
was
ahead and put
Megan.
it in there.
That was
Yep.
Megan.
That was not my work. No.
So
I also want to say that I'm really impressed, and Joyce, you and Terry and may have other comments, but considering that this is a group that has never met in person and has never had a chance to really get to know each other in relationship other than on a screen, and how well we have accepted each other's differences and personalities, which don't really come across very well in two dimension. And so I just want to say that I will look forward to the time that we can meet in 3D and actually share our love for the church.
So
Absolutely.
whoever's crafting the agenda for next month, could we add an agenda item about when and where we might want to meet in person? And have that first actual face-to-face encounter, person-to-person encounter?
Gosh, I feel like we're on Match or something. What's one of those other ones? Those dating things, now we're actually going to meet in person.
Finally. I'm gonna get a cup of coffee.
So is it Kevin? Is Kevin supposed to be?
IRL in real life.
I didn't actually keep track. I just wrote down which region it was.
I know. I'm asking. I can't remember. That's all. So
I
Yes.
would,
Kevin's turn. He said that he would do it. He said that he would do it at another time. Yeah.
so
So,
we'll need to find out his availability.
yeah.
And I know Wednesdays aren't good for him.
That's correct. Wednesdays are not good for him.
So this would be a Tuesday then, so.
This is a Tuesday. This was back to our original.
Right.
Right.
and Peggy will
And-
be gone, like she said.
On the 25th, can we move it up to the 18th?
Are you saying we've been meeting on the 3rd?
No, we had been
Tuesday
doing the
night.
4th.
But it is
But-
in 4 weeks. I mean, still,
Yeah.
4 weeks is a good amount of time, I think, to meet between. Any longer, it starts forgetting, I suppose. I don't know.
Right.
It's been the 4th week pretty much every time until this one.
Right. But in order to keep Peggy available for us, I would be willing to do another month on the 3rd week.
I can do the 18th.
18th's good for me.
As long as we stay with Tuesday.
Joyce?
I was just debating about a meeting I will have to leave, but I think it's okay because I think they'll record it so I can listen to it later.
All right. Same time at 7 to 8:30. Is that good for everybody on that Tuesday?
Did
All right.
someone say that Kevin would be okay with leading it, that he won't be, this won't catch him by surprise? Daryl, I think you mentioned something about that.
Well, and he, one time he mentioned he couldn't, something happened. He said, I'll do it later. I mean, so I know he's aware of that later, but no, I mean, he needs to be asked. Yes, certainly by, I don't know.
Regular rotation, as I understand it, would be if Kevin's going to facilitate, Meg, you would stay involved to help with that transition. Joyce as
Right.
consultant and Bill as a regional minister. So
That
would it
should-
be okay to ask Bill if you would check with Kevin to see if he's able?
Oh, sure.
Kind of check in with him?
Mhm.
So that would be the team that would do the planning.
And if he is not able to, just let me know, Bill, since we've changed it to where I won't be out of town, then he can just do it twice. I mean, I've got
2 in a
flexibility.
row. No.
You said that, not me.
All right.
Happy to do that.
Because we had a lot of good discussion tonight, and he may feel like since he missed it,
No choice. He's up next.
okay, that sounds good.
And
Read
he
the
can
notes,
read
watch
Chris's
the Zoom.
notes.
Read the notes, watch the Zoom.
Yeah.
What'd you say, Lori?
He can read Chris's notes. That's pretty much everything we said.
Bill, will you let me know when you are able to reach him and hopefully get a yes, and then we can schedule? I mean,
I
I
will
can try to get.
contact him tomorrow.
Thank you.
The only other thing that I see that we need to settle, we talked about rotating a month, at least one monthly article that gets put in each region's newsletter or whatever publication, or even if we do it every other week for putting out among our communication networks. Who is the first 1 or 2 people who want to step forward and say they will do that?
Well, Ruby and I both thanked Kelly for volunteering.
I volunteered for Kansas, but I mean, if you all want to put it in your own publications, I guess I'm not opposed to that, but somebody might want to look at it before it goes out just to make sure I'm not saying something pretty goofy. And I mean, I can get a bit verbose if left to my own devices. So somebody might want to suggest that it be edited down.
I can tell you, I can tell you that our folks that oversee that stuff will say 150 to 200 words max, and even then it might get edited down.
Cliff Notes version.
Wow, that's like trying to write a paper in seminary. I could do with about 20 more pages.
Yep.
Think about how long your congregation can pay attention before they start snoozing.
That's why I retired.
I had a theology professor that said, if I run out of scotch before I finish reading your paper, it won't be a high grade.
That's right. It's down.
So Ken, are you thinking that we would want to try to get the first one out May 1st and the second one out May 15th, or what's in people's minds about the time frame for that?
Right. Well, I know that our deadline for our main monthly publication is for the May edition will be Friday, April 30th. We can sometimes fudge that, but our folks want to be working on editing and laying out and putting together the initial draft for review before it goes out in that first week of May.
I say wait till June.
I mean, I can have something written before the 30th. You know, as far as that goes.
You know, I'm just speaking from our publications and knowing.
I can do it in the next few days.
In my mind, I'm questioning having a communication every 2 weeks. I think it's great that we're planning, communicating, but my people are in the routine of receiving their once a month newsletter. And I'm wondering if they're gonna come back going, whoa, what's all this stuff you're mailing out to us? But I want to make sure that I share whatever we're bringing forth. Anybody else have thoughts on that?
I think once a month would be what I would prefer.
Yeah, I agree. I think every couple of weeks might be overkill. So
Who do you want me to send this to? All of us? Some of us?
That's probably a good idea, Kelly, because then all of us are encouraged to share that in whatever way that we can. Obviously, we want to put that out in a regional publication, but that also affords people the opportunity to share that in some different ways. Maybe bring it up in their Sunday
if
school.
anybody has edits to suggest, please suggest them early.
It might be helpful if those of you who are regional ministers might just say it's going to be Nebraska's turn, it's going to be KC's turn, it's going to be, I mean, just kind of give us a chance to regionally decide who it is going to write the next one. Ruby and I will always be willing to give access to Kelly.
I was going to say, be careful what you're saying there.
We'll be always happy to edit, offer suggestions.
Well, and I will caucus with, let's see, I'm going to suggest that Kansas City takes on the next one just so that we can get a sequence going, and then we can caucus about who will write that.
Kevin's not here, so it's going to be Kevin.
All right. Is there anything else we need to wrap up with real quick, or are we?
Did we have a connection with the Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan group that we were going to talk to? Or somebody that can connect? Just to let them know we want to invite them. I know we still want to get our questions ready. But.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that if nobody else wants to jump in there. It's an easy thing to do. Pick up the phone, talk to two regional ministers. And
Bill, why don't you do that?
okay.
Well, we thank you for bearing with me. We went a little over time, but I think it was good. I think our discussion was good, and it was necessary to keep it going. So
Leadership, Megan.
Nice job,
Megan.
Nice job.
I was really nervous. So.
I know.
You did a great job.
You
did
great
great.
job, Meg. Really
Great
nice.
job.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we don't bite.
Yeah. That's good.
thank you, Megan.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Well, we will see you all next month. And thank you. Have a good night.
Take care, everyone.
God bless you.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Blessings, everyone.
Blessings.